Episode number 2.
If you're a lion, basically you'll accept anybody's invite.
Really?
Yes. So if you see that,
I've never heard of that before.
so it just means you're accepting everybody. I was on LinkedIn for years, and I just learned what it was, and but it's also in my business name, so I'm like, it fits. Just go with it.
Welcome to the Govcon Giants Podcast, federal contracting for people on the outside looking in. If you are here to learn how to win a piece of the pie without getting your face smashed in, then you've tuned in to the right place. Now, the giant that not only walks the walk, but talks the talk, your host, Eric Coffey.
Today we have Robert Wink, CEO of Integrity Line Acquisitions. Robert comes with vast experience. He retired from the U.S. Army with multiple deployments to Iraq, was a contracting officer with FEMA, and is currently a contract specialist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Robert has also written 2 books, Small Business Starter Guide to Federal Government Contracts and Searching for Solicitations, and Secrets to Non-Competitive Government Contracts. With that said, introducing Robert Wink. So, how are you today, brother?
I'm pretty good. Yourself?
Not too bad. Where are you at?
I'm actually in Omaha, Nebraska right now.
Omaha, Nebraska. Wow. It's funny because I thought she said you were with the Corps of Engineers in Kansas. Had you worked with them before?
No, actually, my phone number is from the Kansas City area. I was an Army recruiter for 3 years, so I just kept it.
Oh, okay. Because I actually, so I did a project recently over in Wichita, Kansas. I built a flight simulator building for the Corps of Engineers over there.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's why I thought maybe, we might know some of the same people. But that's okay. So listen, Robert, tell me, you've got an interesting stories. So tell me exactly, how did you first learn about government contracting? When did you come into wanting to be a contracting specialist? Tell us how did that all come about?
When I was in the Army, I just finished my master's degree in emergency and disaster management. That was about 2012, actually 2011. And I had a friend of mine reach out to me who was a 51 Charlie, which is the Army side of contracting. Their military occupation specialty skill, it's what their MOS is. So he hit me up about 2012, and he's like, hey, this is a great fit for you. You should apply for it.
Okay.
And during that time, I was in charge of a platoon of 45 soldiers, prepping them for Afghanistan, and I moved into operations. So I was like in operations, and I'm thinking, what's next? I've led soldiers. I've managed a 1,200-man battalion operations staff, like what the current operation is, future operations, logistics, training. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what is next? What is the next big thing? And I remember that email, that friend reached out to me, Eric Sears. He's a great guy. So I remembered it. So I applied, and then I got accepted, and that's what started it. So March of 2013 is when that contracting career started.
Okay. And did you start in Omaha, or where did you start at originally?
Actually, I went to Fort Hood, Texas. They sent me out to some training in where'd I go? I went to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. Did some training down there, and then I came back to Fort Hood for about 3 years to do contracting and doing some physical fitness. There were some issues, and I got checked out. And the Army's like, "Hey, you're broke. You can't go deploy to support operations around the world." And that's when I was like, "Oh, wow."
You need a desk job.
Well, I was at a desk, but I couldn't even support it from that realm because of the physical fitness aspect of, the running the 2 miles. I wasn't. It was the health concerns,
Okay,
and so
okay.
I was like, well, that's I guess the next chapter in my life. I talked to some people, and they're like, we can have you hang out for 8 years and kind of move you around and get you that, U.S. Army, retirement check. And I was like, no, I'm done. I'm ready to walk out. The Army's changing. It's not the same Army I knew. So I got out and went to FEMA.
Okay. Doing the same thing.
Doing the same thing. Absolutely.
Okay. And then, so you worked at FEMA, and I noticed you said, I was reading your profile earlier. You said you worked, the disaster you worked on was in Texas, Hurricane Harvey?
Yes, it was for Hurricane Harvey.
Okay. And what did you do, like, exactly? I think, and the reason why I'm asking is because I think a lot of people are still confused about the job of a contracting specialist versus a contracting officer. So I'd like to try and see if we can help clarify some of those things. What are the differences from the contracting specialist to the contracting officer?
I try to explain it. The simplest way of explaining it is this way. You have your attorney, who's the one that approves everything and can negotiate on behalf of, whoever they're representing. That's your attorney. Now, the person that does the legwork and all the hard core work of getting into the weeds and looking at the laws and policies and regulation, even though attorney does that, it's your paralegals at the end of the day.
Yep.
They're the ones that write everything. It goes to the attorney to review and back and forth. Well, in the government, the contract specialist is like your paralegal, and the contracting officer is like that attorney. The biggest, and they're not attorneys, contracting officers aren't, but they can actually argue on behalf of the government. But the difference between a contract specialist and a contracting officer is that the contracting officer is the one that has the authority to sign the check on behalf of the government or obligate that money on behalf of the government, to a company. So anybody else that does that, they legally cannot do it. It is the contracting officer.
Okay. So the contracting officer basically takes all of the information that the contracting specialist gathers up and reviews it and then makes a determination of whether or not to obligate the government.
In short, yeah, it gets more complex than that, but we'll keep it simple for now.
No. I mean, yeah, hey, listen, again, I've read the FAR, not from cover to cover, but I mean, I've read parts of it and I could understand why, this is something that people don't want to take on just because, parts reference other sections, which reference other subparts and other chapters. And, it's complicated for a lot of people out there.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, it is. So tell me, now, okay, you worked at FEMA, and then when did you transition over to the Corps of Engineers?
That was about the August timeframe of 16.
Okay.
Or actually, let's go June through August of 16 is when I made that transition.
Okay. So how was there? Did you see any differences between working at FEMA and the Corps of Engineers? And how they do business with small firms?
Absolutely. Because even at the Army, I was at the Mission Installation Contracting Command, and we were very heavy on small businesses.
Okay.
So Fort Hood, Texas, we had a small business specialist we worked with, and they were anything over 10K had to get approval, 10,000.
Okay.
So the market research would have to reflect our acquisition strategy, which route are we going? And so we may be, hey, we're going woman-owned small business. We may be low in those categories, or the Small Business Administration has a set of NEX codes that have been identified for preferential toward woman-owned small business or economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. So the Army, every week I would be in a brief when I was a contracting officer representing my team leads or being the team lead. I'd go into these meetings and we knew where we were at statistically at all times. Wow. It was amazing. The Fort Hood did a great job. Went to FEMA. Man, FEMA. That was FEMA's a whole different animal when it comes to contracting. Okay. And what I mean by that, and I'll stick with the small business side. When I would bring up, hey, what's our small business goals? You got that deer in the headlight look. Wow. There was, I think, in the 2 years and couple weeks I was there, not one time did we ever talk small business goals. Wow. And what it was is that you have, for example, when I worked in Denton, Texas, there is a website, absolutely, where you can pull those percentages, those goals. Yep. And so I would go to that website, I'd use it, I'd pull my goals, and this is my strategy. Boom, I'm moving forward. And, working with one of my supervisors, because there's a different threshold, she was like, why do you have this in here? I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? That's statistics. I got to meet these goals. Take it out. And I was mind blown by that. It just blown. And then I would go to these disasters. I did some work in Louisiana as well.
Yep.
And during a disaster, the disasters have a local area set aside.
Okay.
Prime example, Hurricane Harvey. You had Fort Worth, Tarrant County, Fort Worth area, and then you have majority of the Houston area down there going out toward Beeville and going toward Louisiana. A bunch of counties out there. So during those disasters, those presidential declared disasters, we are supposed to, and within the first 150 days, we can contract to anybody because it's disaster, it's go. But during that time, we have to start moving and transitioning to local area set-asides. And so we have to compete. And so if I need software or if I need a hardware or desk, furniture, I'm supposed to compete it within the declared counties.
Yep.
And so doing that at FEMA, they have a lot of strategic sourcing contracts in place. So I'd be like, hey, local area set aside. This is what we're doing. And I'd be briefing and moving forward. And then you have always somebody, FEMA's different. I'm going to tell you why. It's because you have individuals that are permanent contracting personnel.
Uh-huh.
You have individuals like me. I was a core. So every 2 years, we kind of get renewed on a contract. And then you have reservists. Reservists are kind of like they come into the disaster and they leave. They're basically like when disasters strike, we mobilize them to support.
Okay, like temporary workers.
Temporary workers, absolutely.
Okay.
And the issue you have with that is that these temporary workers, they may have done contracting for years, but they're not doing it actively. Things change. I mean, you've seen it. The FAR changes. We use the HASAR, and then there's our manual called the HASAM. There's things that change. And so when you go to these disasters and, there's these contract specialists and officers may stay there 30 days, 90 days, but it can't exceed 50 weeks for tax purposes. So you have this high turnover and where not everybody's on the same page, you start seeing contract issues, missing option clauses, and just different things. So you show up at a disaster and you inherit these things. You're like, what's going on? Or if you sit there and try to go toward that so going back to that local area set aside thing, is that you're like, hey, FEMA goes, hey, we have a strategic contract in place. You have to go through these small businesses to buy any software, hardware, any computer stuff,
right,
or furniture. And there's actually a waiver FEMA uses, and it gets signed one level above the contracting officer to validate. It takes less than 5 minutes to do.
Okay.
An hour tops. And so you'll sit there and you go, hey, it's time to sign this. We're going to get away from the strategic sourcing contracts because these small businesses are in Colorado and the DC area and Florida. And it's like, that's not supporting the local economy, putting that money back. And so when I brought this up during Hurricane Harvey, people were shocked by it. And they're like, what's this? I'm like, this is law. This is policy. This is, and it was trying to get that thought process through that, hey, it's about the local area set-asides. And so some of the arguments you would have was, well, the only person that's local is a large business. We're going to go to them. And I'm like, now you're on that fence of, and like you were saying, the FAR is confusing. Well, we all know that if the threshold, well, back then for services was $2,500 up to $150,000, but we get waivers to make that a $750,000 for simplified acquisition. And so I would sit there and say, hey, can't award it to a large business because FAR Part 19 says anything that's within a threshold has to go small business. And so you'd have a lot of those back and forth things going on. So that's FEMA. I went to the Army Corps of Engineers up here in Omaha, Nebraska. I work on the environmental contracting side. Very different.
Right.
They do a lot of May talks with small businesses.
Okay. Yeah.
But their biggest thing I've noticed up here is your 8As.
Right.
And it's very beneficial. So it's definitely a different. Every agency is different in how they handle things.
Interesting. Yeah. And as you can imagine, trying to as a new business, right? Let's say you're a new company, you've got less than 10 employees. How would you know all this stuff?
You're exactly, and you're absolutely right. And so that's kind of what led me to actually write and publish my books.
Okay, good.
When I was at FEMA, I was dealing with these mobile home parks. And I would call them and go, hey, you have a mobile home park. You're allowed this many spaces. FEMA would like to do business with you. We want to rent your spaces out. And so a lot of these, especially in the deeper South, you have a lot of older individuals that own these mobile home parks.
Right.
Some didn't even have a computer. I'm serious. And
Wow.
so you'd be like, hey, let's get you enrolled in sam.gov. Let's walk you through the process. And some people would do the process on their own and they would quit.
Really?
They'd get so frustrated, or because FEMA has 3 individuals that are contract specialists. Some are contracting officers, but they are dedicated to helping small businesses get enrolled. Well, during that time of Hurricane Harvey, there was none. There was one person in DC that handled all that stuff for FEMA, and she was amazing. I mean, but that's when I'm like, I'm going to do the process myself. I'm going to learn it. And that's why I published the Small Business Starter Guide to Federal Contracts and Searching for Solicitations. It's because I feel like that's the basics.
Okay.
And so that's what led me to that. And then to help businesses get going, understanding how to enroll in SAM, to go to FedBid, FBO, what are next codes, set-asides. So it's just a basic foundation. And there's companies out there that take the same information in my book. I know a couple in Florida. They will charge people anywhere from $400 up to $5,000 to enroll them in sam.gov. It's free. It's unbelievable.
Right. No, I know. I see them all the time. I see it all the time.
It's embarrassing.
I know it is. And I think for me, what I find is that the government allows these companies to exist, to use government names and their titles to mislead people. I see it all the time. So, for example, some of the companies are named, contractor registration. I think that should be illegal. They should not have their name. Have a government title in it to give people the false appearance as though they are representing the government. And then in very, very small fine print at the bottom, they'll say we are not a government agency. But all of the other, their website and all the other information portrays them as a government agency. So I can see how that would be confusing to people because, with my network and my YouTube channel, I get it all the time. People say, Eric, is this company real? Does this company exist? I get it. I get it every week. Every week, people say, Eric, this company told me I have to pay $400 to get my DUNS number. Is that true? I have to, people sell. You said Sam. People sell DUNS numbers. They sell cage codes, MPINs. People sell you anything. They'll sell you anything if you let them.
Oh, no, exactly. And being a prior Army recruiter, and understanding that I was selling an idea, a lifestyle, and then coming to government contracting, I get the same thing. And I saw it at Hurricane Harvey. I saw it at, throughout. And it frustrated me that I hear these companies, and I even get emails on it and I laugh, but hey, we could promise you a contract.
Right.
Or hey, if do this or do that and you're guaranteed a contract. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not commercial sales. It's about being fair and even. Doesn't mean it always exists, however, but it's to create that platform of where it's being fair, the competition, and to see these companies take advantage of people that don't know. Oh, we're going to develop a marketing plan and we're going to send it out to all the contracting officers and you're going to get a contract. Well, I laugh because, and I made a joke about this the other day, and it's like, you want to sell me Barbie dolls, for example. And I had this one person, man, the government could need it. Well, why don't you go read FAR Part 11, describing the agency need? As a commercial entity, you don't describe the agency's need.
Right.
The government, the individual describes the agency need.
Correct.
And there's that separation of powers. And I call it the fiscal triad. The Army called it the fiscal triad, and it holds true. It's to stop the ethics violations and the backdoor contracts. Do they exist? Yes. Okay. I 100% believe they exist. There are probably some very crooked contract specialists and contracting officers and program offices. In my experience, I have not run across any. And maybe that's just me. I haven't seen it, and in a heartbeat would report that. That's integrity is a very touchy subject, and I'm big on. So,
okay. Well, I can tell you this, Robert. I can say this for myself. Several of my friends are SBA award winners, personal friends, and I remember them having very, very little capital, just getting started their business, a few employees, and now to having 50, 75 employees and doing $30, $40 million a year. So if they can do it, and I mean myself, I've done probably $25, $30 million in contracts, from someone that had no experience, right, to just working my way up. So, if those people exist out there, they're probably at a very high level on some stuff that I would never personally get to or touch. But I'm not going to be, I don't see myself doing, $2 billion contracts for space satellites or anything like that. So probably at that level, or I don't see myself building jets or aircraft. So, but in the construction world, and doing regular, renovations, bathrooms, replacements, it seems to me everyone's got a fair shake. That's what I've seen.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's where you go into the FAR and the solicitation, and you look at the technical how is the government going to evaluate? Once you get there, I mean that opens up the playing field.
Right.
But everybody's reviewing the same solicitation, the same documents, and it does create that level playing field. And that's what I love about the government is that less than 2% of people even pursue government acquisitions contracts. And I'm like, do you not realize that more money is probably spent in government contracts than the commercial industry?
So tell me where'd you get that number from? You said less than 2% of people actually pursue government contracts?
Yeah, that's what I've read. I mean,
okay.
If you go on,
wow.
Well, you got to think of how many businesses are out there.
Okay.
And go look at sam.gov.
Okay, that makes sense. I've never did a comparison or contrast of that information. But that makes sense. Okay.
I read it somewhere. Don't know if it's true or not, but everybody says statistics are made up anyway. But it's just an area I looked at. But looking at it, I'm like, it does make sense because how many businesses are constantly looking for that next job? This is another approach, and that's where I kind of start going, into my second book. But we can do commercial sales all day. I can go knock on every door and go, hey, do you want to do government contracts? Every day. I could do that. And that's to the individual that doesn't own a business. Well, they have to get a business. So the commercial individual, the consumer, is not my market. But the business itself, so, you got, the business to consumer, the business to business, and the business to government. So depending on what type of business you are, you might have different markets. Nail salons, they're catering to the consumer, where they may go after some businesses and offer some deals, but their main focus is consumers. But like you said, construction, top 10 next code used in the U.S. Your general construction. That touches all markets.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say that 20 million, 25 million, you're dead. You're dead on. When you sit there and you look at renovations and things of that nature, you're right there. And then you go into real estate. There are so many. Construction touches everybody.
Right. Correct.
So yeah, if anybody was going to get into government contracts, construction all day, 100%. I'd push that.
Okay, let me ask you this, bringing you back to the book. So now tell me about your company that you're working with now, Integrity Line Acquisitions.
Actually, so for when I came to FEMA, I was bored because getting out of the Army, I was used to doing 100 things, just constantly multitasking. And so when I showed up to FEMA, it was like, go sit in your corner, don't start problems, be quiet, do your job.
Wow, I would have never guessed that.
Because, I deployed to a disaster, and they're like, and I was told, we don't care about your Army experience. What you knew in the Army and contracting does not apply to FEMA. And I was just mind blown by being told that, because I come from the Army of, I have the FAR, we have over 700 clauses. I go to the DFARs, probably around 600-700 clauses too. Then I go to the AFAR, okay. But then I came to FEMA, I got the FAR, 700 plus clauses. And then I go look at the HSAR, I'm like less than 50 clauses, and over 80% is geared toward the Coast Guard.
Wait, now let me you keep saying that word. What is it called?
The HSAR?
What is that?
That's the supplement to
Spell it.
The FAR for FEMA.
Spell it.
So Homeland Security Acquisition Regulation.
Okay.
So you know how the Army DOD has the DFARs,
yep.
the defense? Well, FEMA has their own, and it's the HSAR.
Okay, gotcha.
So they only have 50 additional clauses, and 80 to 90% is geared toward the Coast Guard.
Interesting. You think it's because of the umbrella that they fall under?
Homeland Security, great contracting. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, because like you said, Homeland Security and Coast Guard. I mean, they're the same.
Absolutely, you're right. Absolutely, and so it's a lot simpler contracting, where DoD is just it's complex. It's a whole nother beast.
Do you think that makes it easier for a small business or harder to work with FEMA?
I think it makes it easier.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you why, and this is a personal opinion, is that when I came to FEMA, there's a lot of stuff that I saw, and it was still that Hurricane Katrina mentality. There was statement of works for service contracts, which we all know FAR Part 37 says PWS, or statement of objectives, and then if it's a statement of objectives, the contract will develop the PWS. So they were still using statement of objectives, and statement of work, correction. And I was just surprised by that. And so I was like, okay, so this is what I'm walking into. And as you sit there and you start working on these disasters and communicating with some of the contracting officers and specialists, some of them grew up in Hurricane Katrina. That's where they started contracting, and they're still at FEMA doing contracting. So they were learning from other people that all they knew was the FEMA way. And so it was a very, I would say, very scary, because if I was a contractor, I'd be looking at FEMA contracts all day.
Well, I think what's for people out here, tell me the difference between the statement objective versus the performance work statements. Why does that matter to a contractor? Okay.
So a PW, performance work statement, is it's I need you to complete this, but I don't care how you complete it. But there's a measurement. So you got to provide this document and you got to perform this type of work, but we're going to measure your process along the way. Okay. Where the statement of objectives is, hey, I need you to do janitor work on this 5,000 square foot building, 200 rooms. You tell me how you're going to do it. You develop those metrics.
Really?
Yeah. So that's, and you don't see a lot of statement of objectives. I haven't seen them a lot lately, But the thing about the difference between FEMA and DOD is training. Yes, we all go to the same courses that the government does. We all get the same certification, either DIWEA or FAC-C. But you could see the difference between somebody that's been in DOD and who's been at FEMA their whole life. At least I noticed the difference all day.
Well, do you think it has anything to do with you being the young guy coming in with the open mind?
No, you're right. Nobody likes change.
I've done this for say the better part of 12 years, and like you said, a lot of the people I remember 10 years ago, some of those people were, they were old then. So I don't, 10 years fast forward, these people are even older. So you think that has anything to do with it?
I think age, yeah, absolutely does have something to do with it. And I think it's a two-sided coin. There's some individuals that work in the government that are contract specialists and officers, and age is not a factor. They're hungry, they stay on top of their craft, and they go. And those are the most impressive individuals I see. And I've seen that at the Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, Fort Hood, Texas. But then there's individuals that come to work, collect a paycheck, and want to play on Facebook all day. Seen that too. And those are the individuals you try to educate, and you go, hey, I reviewed the solicitation you're about to post. You're missing the following clauses. I don't care. I'm the contracting officer. Woo. Whoa. Okay. I'm just letting you know. But then they get a protest, or they start administrating the contract after it's been awarded, and they get these equitable adjustments and these claims, and they're like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. What do I do? And I'm just like, I told you, it's about risk. You got to look at the risk before you post it.
Interesting. Now, that's on the side of the government, protecting the government. But what about the little guy side, right? So I'm the little guy, and I've got all these FAR clauses in a solicitation. How is it possible for me to understand all this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I saw this the other day, and I thought it was interesting. Somebody says when you do your taxes, you go into an enrolled agent, an accountant, or an H&R Block, or Liberty. You go to the experts. Same could be said about contracting. You can go get an attorney, and you're going to pay a lot.
Oh, forget it. That's not even an option.
That's not even an option. No, small businesses, you're right.
That's not even an option.
You can go find a consultant that knows the FAR. But if, let's say, you want to learn it yourself, you got to read it. At the end of the day, you have to read that solicitation. And so what I tell everybody to do is, as soon as you see something that you think you can do, read that performance work statement, or that statement of objectives, or the CLIN structure, whatever the government's attempt or trying to purchase. First question you've got to ask yourself is, can you do it? But then the next question you have to ask is, before you even say, can I do it? You got to know, are you even able to actually achieve it? So prime example, I had a friend of mine, he does security, has a security company, Tim Easton, great guy, out of Missouri. And he's like, he'll email me every once in a while or call me. Hey, I'm looking at this solicitation. I've been looking at it for hours. I'm lost. I'm like, all right, Tim, let's walk this together. You're a disabled veteran business. All right, so we walk through the solicitation. I'm like, let's look for your set-asides. So we're looking at, different FAR clauses. So usually your 52-2-5 on commercial will tell you which ones are checked. So you're looking for 219-whatever. And so you're going through there and seeing which ones are checked. I'm like, all right, this one's checked for a hub zone. Are you a hub zone? He's like, well, no. He's like, so you're telling me I wasted 8 hours looking at this? I'm like, yeah, wasted your time. First, you got to know if your set aside can even do it. That's rule 1.
Right.
Rule 2, go find FAR provision 52.216-1. And when that one does, it tells you what type of contract it's going to be. I tell everybody this. A good friend of mine, she won a $10 million contract. She called me, or she emailed me, and then she called me, and she's like, hey, Robert, I won a $10 million contract. Ecstatic. And it was her first contract too. I was like, oh, congrats, this is amazing. And then I looked at it, and I'm like, you didn't win a contract. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you won a BPA, a blanket purchase agreement.
Right.
She's like, what? What? And I'm like, you didn't win a contract. You won a BPA. Congrats. But good BPA overall. She's like, well, can you review it? Because, she already signed it. And so I went through it, and I'm like, oh, my goodness, it was horribly written. It was the most and worst BPAs I've ever seen written. And then she got a call against it, and I'm reviewing, she sent to me, she's like, hey, how should I do this? And it was just an email, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, do you have a copy of the BPA? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you signed it. Did the government sign it and send it back to you? She's like, well, no. I'm like, well, then you don't have a BPA.
Right.
Makes it worse. I'm like, well, let me do some digging for you. So I go into, government spending. I go into FPDS, and we look. And I'm like, oh, no, that's your BPA number. No, it exists. You have a BPA. It's legit. Well, she reaches out to them to get a copy. They don't respond. A couple weeks later, no response. And so I told her, hey, go do a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. Push for it. And then all of a sudden, she's like, hey, can you look again? And this is tools anybody can use that's in the government or out of the government. There's nothing that's ethically wrong about this. So I look. It's deleted. They deleted the contract action reports.
Why would they do that?
Beats me. And I don't know why. And she's still waiting for answers. And
no.
Yeah, she's still waiting for answers.
So, in that case, what you're referencing the FAR 52 dot what?
216-1.
Now, what is that?
That one's contract type. It will tell you what type of contract type it is.
What does it matter for people?
What it matters is that you can go on there and read that. So, and usually a BPA will tell you it's a BPA up front.
Yeah, of course. Come on. Now listen. A BPA says BPA, okay? MATOC, IDIQ, like you can't be misled by that. So you don't need to read a FAR to know it's a BPA. That was, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that provision is so big is that provision will tell you what type of contract it is. If it's not in there, I can tell you automatically that's below $250,000. I already know what my price point is. It's below $250,000 because that's a simplified acquisition threshold. And then I'll look, okay, now is there anywhere on this solicitation that they're only asking for information? No, probably not, because you'll see a sources sought or a special notice posted. If this is a combined synopsis solicitation, you'll see that clause. If you don't, you already know that the contract type, it's going to be firm fixed price under $250,000.
Okay.
That's a cheat. That's a little cheat that I use.
Okay.
And there's certain clauses out there that you can use to cheat with, and I mean that because it's fair. But like, there's certain clauses that say you have to put this clause in if it's over $15,000. You have to put this clause in if it's over $35,000. So as soon as I see that clause, I already know where I'm starting at. Now, not every contract specialist or contracting officer are that in depth, and they may forget to put that provision or clause in there. But if you see it, you know where you can run with.
But isn't most of the time the price is already published when they issue those things? They give you a range?
No, you're talking construction now.
No,
construction.
Okay.
You have a magnitude. When you do services or supplies, no. But
okay.
It's not hard to develop those. I mean, a supply. Prime example: had a friend buying light towers. So it was his first buy ever. And so him and I talked down. He's like, well, if you were the government, how would you buy this? I'm like, dude, it's simple. Can you manufacture them? He's like, well, no, I can't manufacture light towers. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, so you as a consumer, where would you buy them from? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, dude, come on. You're buying light towers. Where are you going to buy them from at? He's like, well, I'm going to Amazon. I'm going to Google. I'm like, okay, you can do that. You're a disabled-owned business. You fall into that right small business set-aside, and you're buying light towers. Go to Google and find the best price. Simple as that. Call the company, see if you can get the best price, see if they're willing to do a tax exemption, because, that could save you, where I'm at in Dallas, 8.25%. That's great.
Sure.
So now I know I'm already ahead of the game, 8.5%. Okay. I can make that a profit margin if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And everybody, natural industry norm for supplies and services is 10%. Now, I know I'll hear some backlash on that, but yes, cost, construction. Yeah, you're laughing.
No. Listen, again, I tell people pricing is, it's more of an art than it is a science.
You're right.
I have seen, again, it's like you said, even in the construction industry, forget the FAR clauses. The people who are actually doing the scopes of work or the performance work statements, they don't take into account so many factors. So for example, we're doing a historic window project. If we have to take out the windows, just imagine the windows inside of your house. We ask a simple question: are we going to be replacing the interior drywall? They go, well, why would you do that? Well, if you take out a window and the frame, obviously the inside of your house is going to be impacted just as much as the outside. This is a historic frame. And again, but they're thinking that, okay, well, the windows come in from the out. But because this is a commercial building and the frames are still frame, it's just a lot of things the government, the people who wrote this up didn't have a full in-depth knowledge of what was involved in putting this together. So that's where for us, the whole pricing point is, okay, do you account for that now in the beginning because you know that this is going to need to be done, or do you not account for it because it's not explicitly stated and then run the risk of having to eat it later or trying to attempt to, like you said, like the other person was doing, equitable adjustments.
And you're 100% absolutely right. I have friends that own construction businesses, commercial and government side, and they're like, our intent is 40, 50% plus profit every time. And I agree. Profit, absolutely. But when the government looks at fair and reasonable accordance to the independent government estimates, you try to be around that 10% margin. But like you're saying, is how do you price for it? And you're right, it's an art. And the person in the government doing it, they're not construction experts.
No,
Some aren't. No, absolutely. We know this. But a lot of them will use what's called RS means. At least Fort Hood did.
No, I've seen it. I've seen RS means used a lot.
It's a great tool. And that's what the government tries to use 90% of the time in construction. And so, at least from my experience. I agree. As a contractor, you're right. You have to look at all risk. They may not account for the drywall. You're absolutely right. So I tell everybody, you account for all risk and to make profit. You never go into a project to lose money unless it's to keep your business afloat. It's either not working or taking a little bit of loss just to keep the doors open and employment. But that's a business decision.
Oh, it's a business decision. Right. So that's why for me, when you said that, with the services and stuff, 10%, it's not, because people ask me that question, well, how much should I mark up a job? And I said, well, how much risk is involved? And that for me would be how you mark it up based on the amount of risk you have to take. That it's very difficult to teach someone. They have to kind of almost go through some of these experiences on their own. And then, like you said, probably start off small. That way, if they lose, it's not terribly impactful in their business. But like you said, you definitely want to go in this thing bidding to win, not to lose, and not to beat the other person. I tell people all the time, bid it so that you can make profit for yourself. Don't worry about what the other person's bidding, because if you're trying and play a numbers game, they could have missed something and you could end up costing you money.
No, I 100% agree. And a lot of the businesses that I deal with, they want to go after the above 250,000, the multi-millions. And I'm like, you've never done a government contract.
Right.
You've only done a little bit of commercial, but nothing of that magnitude. You're not going to win if there's a technical evaluation on past performance.
No, they won't.
So stop thinking big start small. I have a good friend of mine. He's not a good friend of mine, an acquaintance, I'll call him. Multi-million-dollar business, construction. Very good at what he does. He wants to get into government contracts. And I think he'd be very successful. And he does have historical history in developments of apartment complexes and housing. And I think he could actually do well. But I cautioned him. I'm like, if you decide to go this route, just reminds you that the government may not look at your commercial experience as the same as the government.
Right.
And you may be just spending money on these proposals and lose. Start small. See if it's profitable.
Wow. So with that said, is there anything that you'd like to tell the audience before we close out today?
I would say it's a pleasure for having me on the show. Fun, great talking to you, and I'd love to come back on and learn more about your company and the people you help out. And or if any guests have questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Okay. No, listen. If you want to leave an email address for someone to write down and send you an email about questions, that'd be perfectly okay. Okay. My email address is robert.wink@integritylionacq.com. Okay. Hey, listen, Robert, thank you so much today. I appreciate the time that you took out. This has been wonderful. I had a lot of fun, and I'll let you know next time when it comes out. All right. Thank you so much, Eric, and I look forward to communicating with you again. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. You can find the show notes from this episode at govcongiants.com/show02. All the information regarding Robert's book, Small Business Starter, and his contact information. He did say feel free to reach out to him, so I take advantage of that. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast, Govcon Giants, over at Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, wherever you're listening. If you could, please give us a 5-star review in iTunes, as this will increase our exposure to the show, expand our listenership, and also allow us to reach out to more people, attracting more top-notch folks to interview. We want to try and fill in the gaps on what's missing. If you do have any comments or suggestions, I am welcome to them. As always, we'll see you next time.